progress going on. But mankind won't be destroyed. The fact that you and I are working here today is evidence of that. but mankind won't be destroyed. The fact that you and I are working here today is evidence of that.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, selamat datang di acara Indonesia Financial Inclusion Forum atau IFIF di tahun 2020. Sebelumnya izinkan saya memperkenalkan diri, saya dengan Dika Wira dari Sekretariat Dewan Nasional Keuangan Inklusif sebagai MC pada 2 jam ke depan di acara IFIF hari ini. Selama forum ini berlangsung, saya mohon izin untuk memandu acara dengan bahasa Indonesia. Hal ini sesuai dengan amanat Peraturan Presiden Nomor 63 Tahun 2019 tentang penggunaan bahasa Indonesia. Namun, Bapak dan Ibu tidak usah khawatir karena webinar ini didukung dengan fitur penerjemah melalui teks bahasa Indonesia dan bahasa Inggris yang berada di bawah layar aplikasi Zoom dan YouTube. Khusus untuk moderator, panelis, dan pembicara dalam aplikasi Zoom, mohon untuk mengaktifkan kolom chat untuk memudahkan berkomunikasi. Serta Bapak Ibu juga dapat menggunakan fitur interpreter dengan memilih bahasa Indonesia atau bahasa Inggris. Baik, Bapak Ibu, di awal kegiatan hari ini, saya juga ingin mengucapkan selamat siang dan selamat datang kepada yang terhormat Bapak Erdi Rio selaku Asisten Deputi Keuangan Inklusif dan Keuangan Syariah Kemenko Perekonomian Republik Indonesia. Ibu Dunita, Kepala Bidang Keuangan Inklusif Kemenko Perekonomian Republik Indonesia, serta Bapak Ibu para moderator, panelis, dan pembicara, tamu undangan khususnya anggota Pokja dan Mitra Kerja Dewan Nasional Keuangan Inklusif, dan juga tidak lupa Bapak Ibu, rekan-rekan yang mohon maaf kami tidak dapat sebutkan satu-satu namanya. Bapak dan Ibu, IFIF merupakan acara tahunan Sekretariat Dewan Nasional Keuangan Inklusif yang memfasilitasi pertukaran informasi seputar praktik baik antar anggota Pokja Dewan Nasional Keuangan Inklusif, praktisi, serta pemangku kebijakan dari dalam dan luar negeri atau Indonesia. Tahun 2020 merupakan tahun kedua penyelenggaraan IFIF yang mengambil tema transformasi dan pemulihan ekonomi nasional. Pada hari pertama kemarin, kita telah membahas sejumlah strategi untuk mempercepat penyaluran bantuan sosial, merancang program edukasi konsumen dalam rangka perlindungan konsumen layanan keuangan digital, meningkatkan efektivitas program inklusi keuangan dalam pengentasan kemiskinan, dan peningkatan kesejahteraan selama dan serta pasca pandemi COVID-19, tentunya bersama pakar praktisi dari luar dan dalam Indonesia. Sedangkan pada hari ini, kita akan membahas capaian kebijakan dan program kerja keuangan inklusif untuk segmen perempuan, terutama setelah diluncurkannya Strategi Nasional Keuangan Inklusif Perempuan pada tanggal 9 Juni 2020. IFIF terselenggara atas dukungan penuh dari Asian Development Bank selaku pendana tunggal, Women's World Banking, Duta Inklusi Keuangan Indonesia, SMERU Research Institute, dan platform Gratisin Belajar. Pertama-tama untuk membuka IFIF hari kedua, mari kita dengarkan sambutan dari Bapak Erdi Rio selaku Asisten Deputi Keuangan Inklusif dan Keuangan Syariah Kemenko Perekonomian Republik Indonesia. Yang terhormat Bapak Erdi Rio, dipersilahkan.
Ya. Terima kasih Mas Dika. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Yang saya hormati para pembicara, peserta Indonesia Financial Inclusion Forum 2020. Pada kesempatan yang baik ini, saya mengucapkan selamat kepada para peserta Indonesian Financial Inclusion Forum hari kedua. Forum ini merupakan forum tahunan dan yang kedua kalinya dilaksanakan sejak pelaksanaan yang pertama kali tahun lalu. Pada tahun ini, IFIF mengambil tema inklusi keuangan dalam transformasi dan pemulihan ekonomi nasional. Forum ini merupakan kesempatan yang sangat berharga bagi kita semua bertukar pikiran, berbagi pengalaman, dan praktik yang terbaik mengenai inklusi keuangan, tidak hanya dari Indonesia, namun juga kita akan berkaca pada pengalaman negara-negara lain di Asia, Amerika Latin, hingga Afrika. Hadirin yang sangat saya hormati, kemarin kita telah mengikuti keynote speech dari Bapak Deputi Bidang Koordinasi Ekonomi Makro dan Keuangan, Bapak Iskandar Simorangkir, tentang pentingnya inklusi keuangan dalam pemulihan ekonomi nasional. Salah satu inti dari pidato beliau adalah bagaimana besarnya komitmen pemerintah Indonesia dalam memajukan inklusi keuangan, khususnya bagi kelompok perempuan. Pada tahun 2019, terdapat hampir 100 juta perempuan usia produktif di Indonesia. Jumlah ini tentunya merupakan jumlah yang sangat signifikan dalam pencapaian target indeks inklusi keuangan sebesar 90% pada tahun 2024, sebagaimana diamanatkan oleh Bapak Presiden Republik Indonesia pada rapat SNKI tanggal 28 Januari tahun 2020. Berbagai upaya telah dilakukan untuk mengurangi ketimpangan gender dalam pencapaian keuangan inklusif di Indonesia. Menurut Bank Dunia 2017, 51% pemilik rekening tabungan di Indonesia adalah perempuan. Tren yang sama juga ditunjukkan dalam survei Financial Inclusion Index 2018 yang menyebutkan bahwa ketimpangan gender dalam kepemilikan rekening telah berkurang dari 7% 2014 menjadi 1% tahun 2018. Ini tentunya suatu
Mohon maaf, Bapak Erdi Rio, untuk suaranya mungkin.
Ya, mohon maaf. Namun demikian pekerjaan rumah kita belumlah selesai. Tingkat partisipasi angkatan kerja (TPAK) perempuan di Indonesia tidak banyak berubah dalam 20 tahun terakhir, di mana TPAK perempuan sekitar 55% dan laki-laki 83% pada tahun 2018. Ini cukup jauh gapnya ya. Untuk itu perlu kerja keras dalam melaksanakan SNKI yang menyasar kelompok perempuan dalam 4 kategori, yaitu perempuan berpendapatan rendah, perempuan pekerja, ya, kemudian perempuan pemimpin UMKM, dan perempuan pengurus rumah tangga. Pelaksanaan strategi tersebut akan didukung dengan 3 pilar utama, yaitu kemandirian ekonomi perempuan, kesetaraan gender, dan penciptaan ekosistem yang ramah perempuan. Hal ini akan dilaksanakan dengan berbagai program yang real, antara lain meliputi: pertama adalah perluasan penerimaan program kredit usaha rakyat yang akan kita ikuti secara simbolis yang hari ini. Dan tahun ini plafon kita tambah dari 198 triliun menjadi 208 triliun. Kemudian kedua adalah piloting digitalisasi kelompok usaha wanita mekar. Hal ini dibutuhkan karena beberapa kejadian anggota kelompok mekar mengalami tindakan kriminal dari orang-orang yang tidak bertanggung jawab sehingga sampai korban jiwa. Oleh karena itu, dengan pemanfaatan teknologi digital, tentu ini sangat melindungi saudara-saudara kita, ya. Kemudian yang ketiga adalah peningkatkan akses pembiayaan bagi pekerja migran Indonesia. Ini dibutuhkan agar perempuan purna PMI naik kelas menjadi UMKM. Dalam hal ini kita akan bekerjasama dengan berbagai instansi, ya, dan mitra pemerintah, antara lain adalah Perhimpunan Perempuan Pekerja Migran Purna, ya. Kemudian yang keempat adalah edukasi keuangan inklusif dan keuangan syariah bagi kelompok wanita tani. Ini ada di kawasan pedesaan, ya, dan ini perlu kita bantu. Kemudian peningkatan akses pembiayaan bagi UMKM atau koperasi muslimat, ya, pada umumnya adalah koperasi wanita yang berbasis organisasi keagamaan, ya, melalui pengajian-pengajian tentunya. Kemudian yang keenam adalah pengembangan ekosistem keuangan syariah bagi pondok pesantren. Ini sebetulnya sangat terkait dengan posisi Indonesia, ya, di mana sebagai negara dengan mayoritas muslim terbesar di dunia, tapi sharing keuangan syariah itu sangat rendah. Sehingga ini menjadi concern kita bersama dan diharapkan pada akhirnya bisa meningkatkan indeks inklusi keuangan. Untuk itu, perluasan layanan keuangan inklusif bagi perempuan menjadi topik yang sangat relevan dalam diskusi kita siang hari ini, di mana para panelis akan membahas bagaimana strategi nasional keuangan inklusif diharapkan mampu menyasar lebih banyak kelompok perempuan di Indonesia. Saya berharap Indonesia mampu berbagi pengalaman dalam hal ini, dan demikian juga dapat mengambil pelajaran dari praktik inklusi keuangan di berbagai negara mitra keuangan inklusif. Akhirnya, saya selaku Asisten Deputi Keuangan Inklusif dan Keuangan Syariah Menko Perekonomian mengucapkan selamat berdiskusi dalam hari kedua Indonesia Financial Inclusion Forum 2020. Saya mengucapkan terima kasih kepada ASEAN Development Bank, Women's World Banking, Power Group Asia yang telah mendukung terselenggaranya forum ini dengan kerjasama yang sangat baik. Saya juga mengucapkan terima kasih kepada para pembicara yang sangat hebat-hebat yang telah meluangkan waktunya untuk berbagi dalam IFIF 2020. Semoga forum ini bisa menjadi momentum yang sangat baik dalam pencapaian dan perluasan inklusi keuangan dalam pemulihan ekonomi nasional, sehingga pertumbuhan ekonomi kita dapat kembali tumbuh, bangkit, dan penyebaran COVID-19 dapat kita kendalikan. Wallahul muwaffiq ila aqwamit thoriq. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih Bapak Erdi Rio atas sambutannya, dan dimohon agar tetap mengaktifkan kameranya terlebih dahulu, Bapak, karena sesaat lagi kita akan melakukan sesi foto bersama. Dalam sesi foto bersama, saya juga ingin mengundang Kepala Bidang Keuangan Inklusif Kemenko Perekonomian, Ibu Duinita Larasati, moderator pada sesi dialog pertama yaitu Ibu Keiko Novaska selaku Senior Social Development Specialist di Asian Development Bank, beserta para panelis Pak Jo Haristorus selaku Head of Project Management Office Sekretariat Dewan Nasional Keuangan Inklusif, dan Ibu Agustina Erni selaku Deputi Kesetaraan Gender Kementerian Pemberdayaan Perempuan dan Perlindungan Anak Republik Indonesia. Mohon bantuan panitia untuk memberikan aba-aba foto bersama.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to start taking the photo for today's first session. Okay, please look at your camera and please smile brightly. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, once again, 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you everyone.
Baik, Bapak Ibu, terima kasih bersamanya, dan apabila Bapak Erdirio ingin meninggalkan ruangan Zoom terlebih dahulu karena kami memahami bahwa Bapak mempunyai kesibukan yang padat, kami persilahkan. Bapak dan Ibu, tanpa mengulur waktu lagi, kita mulai saja sesi pertama kita, yaitu dialog implementasi Strategi Nasional Keuangan Inklusif Perempuan yang akan dipimpin oleh Ibu Keiko. Sedikit tentang beliau, Ibu Keiko adalah seorang praktisi pembangunan sosial, khususnya di bidang gender. Izinkan saya untuk mengundang Ibu Keiko dan memulai sesinya. Ibu Keiko, dipersilahkan.
Thank you very much. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be the moderator of this session, which will focus on implementing the recently launched Women's Financial Inclusion Strategy. This is a world first to have a focused strategy on women's financial inclusion, and I think it's testament to the deep commitments in this country to supporting women and gender equality. I'm going to quote from the strategy now to give you kind of a flavor of what's included. So the strategy's vision is to ensure that all women in Indonesia have the knowledge, capacity, resources, and opportunities to pursue and enjoy economic empowerment. This vision is underpinned by a commitment to providing equitable and inclusive financial services and programs that respond to the diversity of women's needs and take into account the multiple gendered barriers, including women's unpaid care work, vulnerability to poverty, and discriminatory social norms. So the strategy looks at a broad spectrum of financial inclusion, from financial literacy to entrepreneurship, in acknowledgement that financial inclusion does not end with bank account ownership. It is a critical first step towards economic empowerment and resilience. And in no other time in modern history has supporting and strengthening women's economic resilience been more critical. The strategy originated before the COVID-19 pandemic hit our economies, livelihoods, and societies. And now it aims to tackle the gender gaps in financial inclusion and economic empowerment that have been exacerbated by that pandemic. Today, we have two of the architects of that strategy with me to discuss some of the key points. The Asian Development Bank has been proud to support the strategy and is looking forward to supporting the implementation and partner with the government, as well as working closely with other development partners in Indonesia to contribute to the achievement of that ambitious vision of the strategy. So let us now hear from our two distinguished speakers. So there will be three different rounds of questions. So let's first kind of focus on the objectives of the strategy. So the first question is for Pakari. So the SNKI proposed the strategy just before COVID-19 kind of struck Indonesia and the rest of the world. Why did the SNKI conceive the strategy? How does it complement other strategies that are on financial inclusion? And finally, how has COVID-19 kind of affected or influenced the strategy's objectives?
Thank you. First of all, let me greet my fellow speakers, Ibu Erni, selamat siang. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, all colleagues, friends. It is an honor for me to be here and appreciate the opportunity to share the rationale and some of the background information about the launching of the first, I guess, the first country to issue women financial inclusion strategy. So, Bu Keiko, to respond to your question, as we know, now in Indonesia, we have a national strategy for financial inclusion, which was launched in September 2016 through a presidential decree. This FNKI is actually serves as a guidance for all ministries, government agencies, and all regional government in charting policies and implementing programs to support financial inclusion. While FNKI is designed to achieve financial inclusion, which is defined as a state where all segments of populations in Indonesia have access to formal financial service with a certain quality or criteria to increase their prosperity. The strategy recognizes that there are a certain groups or segment of the populations which are known to still being financially excluded or do not have adequate access to formal financial services and products. These groups include three major segments or groups. The first one is the poor communities or families in Indonesia. These are typically members of the poor families who are currently receiving some form of government social assistance support or programs. For instance, the major one will be the Family Hope Program or PKH, which currently has around 10 million poor families registered in the program. The second group is the micro and small enterprises. In Indonesia, it is estimated that there is around 63.2 million of micro and small enterprises. And many studies suggest that less than half of these enterprises actually currently have access, particularly credits, to formal financial services, mostly banking sector. And the third group is select individuals who have a very distinct challenges or constraints. And these include the migrant workers, people who are living in the outer island, in remote areas in Indonesia. As you know, Indonesia is the largest archipelago country. This includes also people with some type of social problems or disabilities, the youth and students, and finally women. And women is a very distinct and very important group because it cut across the other two groups. For instance, when we're talking about micro and small enterprises, many studies also show that around 60% of micro, small, typically micro enterprises actually owned or managed by women. And we are talking a big number here. It's like, more than 30 million enterprises. And also in the context of poor families, we all know that women as mothers and wives, they're making important decisions that actually affecting the social and economic welfare of families. A lot of decisions about how to use families' financials actually made by women as a mother of wife of poor families. And also obviously, migrant workers, 90% are actually women. So with those in the context, we also realized that despite a lot of progress have been made in the past, 3-4 years. For instance, at the beginning, we heard Pak Erdi mention about the account ownership. That actually, Indonesia is quite different from other countries where women has more bank account than men. And our recent survey also confirmed the data that we received from the World Bank Global Index. There's no significant differences between men and women in terms of account ownership. Having said that, we realize that there are some still existing social economic gender inequality. For instance, Pak Edi also mentioned about women has a much lower labor force participation rate. There are more poor women than poor men. A recent report by the World Bank and the G20 also show that women actually less likely to have mobile phone, to have access to internet, and they are actually a greater percentage of women working in informal sectors. So these are a lot of determinants that actually prompted us to put together this strategy, financial inclusion strategy for women. And when we actually deep diving in these sectors, we realized that women are not a homogeneous group. They varied in terms of the need, the challenges when accessing formal financial services. So this is actually make us even more firmly believe that it is imperative for us to actually have put together a very clear strategy intervention for women. Unfortunately, the national strategy is yet to have this kind of intervention because the strategy is meant for all segments of population, as I mentioned earlier. So that's why the reason why we put together and we launched it back in June. Now with the COVID, actually this amplifies the greater importance of addressing women financial inclusion. As you know, the government has taken a swift and forceful reaction to deal with the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, the total economic recovery package is like 695 trillion, but 47 billion US dollars. It's a huge amount, and a significant portion of this actually consists of social protection programs around 200 trillion and then 120 trillion to support micro SMEs. And as I mentioned, women actually plays important roles in these two professions or these two groups. So, in fact, with the various programs currently being undertaken by the government in response to COVID, it actually created a positive impact to financial inclusion for women. For instance, more people actually have bank account with disbursement more microcredits, you know, with the use of e-money to receive support from government, and that actually added more transaction to the account to increase the use case. And also with the subsidies, you know, restructuring and, you know, of loans and, you know, credit guarantees, this actually make financial service, in this case, microcredit, to be more affordable to many women in Indonesia. I think that's all what I can say, Ibu Keiko. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pak Hari, for such a kind of a comprehensive response. And it's a kind of a nice way for me to kind of segue also now to for my first question for Ibu Elni. So from the Ministry kind of women's empowerment perspective, why do you think this kind of diversity of women, which is a really innovative, I think, and important focus of the strategy, very important approach that we don't see often in many policies and strategies, which I think, as Pak Hari has said, we sometimes treat women as just one group. We all have the same problems, which is not true. And we all kind of differ depending on our income group, religion, caste, and policies need to be able to correspond to that. Could you kind of say why you think this priority on the diversity of women was important for the government? Thank you.
Thank you, Keiko. Good afternoon, everyone. I think, thank you, Pak Johari. You explained everything very well about women. I'm happy to have you as part of this movement. I mean, the strategy. I'm sure that if not Pak Hari is not there, maybe the strategy is not as complete as it is now. Oh, thank you so much, Pak Johari. I think we have to be make a good applause to Pak Johari, Ibu Keiko, because Pak Johari can explain very complete about the condition of the women. We have many vulnerable women in the rural area. They have limited access on the financial inclusion and also for the microeconomic activity. And yeah, as a part of Ministry of Women Empowerment, we have many challenges to empower women, especially as we know that our region of Indonesia is very broad, and also the culture is varies. We have from Aceh to Papua have different culture, and this is our challenge, how we can bring all the women together to have the access of the financial and also the resource for the economic empowerment. And this is the strategy is really in line what we Ibu Menteri Bu Bintang Puspa Yoga has a mandate from the President. One of the mandate is to increase the women entrepreneur. So what we have done, what we want to do in this strategy is really fulfill the first mandate given by the President to Ibu Menteri to increase the entrepreneurship in women. And Pak Johari already explained how the women in the migrant women, and also now we dealing Pak Johari with the how to empower the women as a victim of violence, gitu. Because especially in the pandemic situation, the violence against women is increased, and sometimes they lose power and also have maybe separated from the family. So we have to think about how to empower them, especially in the economic aspect. This is also part of our concern in the pandemic. And what we do in this strategy is really related to our mandate in the RPJMN, that what you call the women labor participation should be increased, as mentioned by Bapak Asdap before, that women participation in labor should be increased by 5 digits in 2024. It's already stated in the RPJM, and also we have the responsibility to increase the, we call it IPG, or Gender Empowerment Index and Gender Development Index. We have to increase in 4 years, we have to increase 0.4% for Gender Development Index, and Gender Empowerment Index should be increased by 2.4 digits in 4 years. And if we analyze how to increase this index, all related to the women empowerment in the economy. So we're really happy with this strategy. It will help us to increase, to achieve the target has been stipulated in the RPJM. That's why we are happy with this strategy, and can help us to help women to be part of the economic development. And we are happy with what the strategy mentioned for the action plan at the commitment of every ministry. That's, we hope that through this strategy, the commitment of other line ministry can be increased, because sometimes they feel that women is different part of the development, but actually women is part of the development. This is what we want to do, and as Pak Johari already mentioned, that we have different problem in every part of the Indonesia. We have different situation in women in Java and also in the east part of Indonesia. And if we want to see the development index, also the quality of the women, mostly the east part of Indonesia, if still need to be put more attention. Pak Johari, maybe if we want to decrease the diversity among the region, we have to look for the east part of Indonesia. And I think this is also maybe in the future when we do the action plan, Pak Johari, we have to make there a special intervention for women in those parts.
Thank you so much, Ibu Elni. I think you've said, you've raised a lot of really interesting points there, and I think a lot of people in the audience, couldn't agree with you more. I'm sure that when you say that questions about women's financial inclusion and economic empowerment is critical for national GDP, and there's a lot of research showing about the importance of closing those gender gaps in labour force participation in order to be able to boost GDP in the era of COVID. I think this is obviously a very sustainable and inclusive strategy for all countries to be pursuing. How is the ministry's programs on women's economic empowerment and resilience linking with the strategy's priority areas? And you've mentioned this a little bit already in your earlier comments, but and will COVID-19 kind of affect these activities and programs?
Yes, Keiko. We have done a survey for the micro enterprises, women micro enterprises. And from the survey, we find out that COVID pandemic really hampered their business. When we do the survey, we find out that most of them, they close their business because of the market. They have no market at all. Usually they do the culinary business in the school and it's closed mostly. Most of the school is closed. And also in the tourism area. And now it has limited access to all the tourism area has been closed. So they don't have the market. The market is already down. And another obstacle that they found is to find the what do you call the bahan baku, what is the products for the production. The raw material for the production is also limited because of the market has a limited supply for the farmer, and the other is no market, no raw material for the production, and also they don't have like in Mekar, Pak Johari, they also have a problem because they cannot pay their credit. This is another problem, but I think the government has come some solution to give them what you call the to adjust their not necessary to pay the credit yet. Still there is impact. And what we have done now, we make them to increase their capacity, especially in the financial management, how to do the finance management. We do the online training in the meantime with the private sector like Bank Mandiri and then BRI, how at that time, because they don't have yet can do their business, so we can give them training to increase how they can do the management for their business later on. And also we do a lot of online, and sometimes another, not just the economic factor, they also have a problem with the what we call food supply, and we work together with the private sector to help them, especially we call it specific need for women and children, because most of the they have problem with the main what do you call tobacco, but they also have a problem with the specific need of women and children. This is what we have done to help them also, but we work together with other line ministries and with the private sector. This is what we have done so far, Keiko, to anticipate the pandemic.
Thank you so much. That's it's great to hear about those programs, especially as we know that women are disproportionately affected by COVID-19 in terms of job losses. And I'll just kind of pick up on one of your points about online, and it'll give me a chance to ask a question to Pakari about the focus on digital financial inclusion. Where is the potential for women's economic empowerment in Indonesia via digital financial inclusion, and what are some of the challenges that you've seen already? And just as a reminder to the speakers, we don't have that much time left, so let's try to keep the answers a bit short. Thanks.
Thank you, Keiko. I was reminded to speak slower, so trying to fit in within the time.
Me too.
So I think the digital financial service obviously give a new promise. It's a new momentum to accelerate women financial inclusion, because with technology now accessing financial services can be made more easier, more convenient, even more secure, and hopefully also more affordable For instance, now in the case of trying to link with women, so caregiver, women who cannot afford to go out the house because she needs to take care of the children, or amending the business, she could do the transaction using a mobile phone, at the comfort of her home. But this is not happening automatically. There are some challenges that we need to address. So I would call it unlocking the potential of digital financial services. And to achieve the full potential of digital technology or adoption technology in supporting women financial inclusion, there are a number of challenges, but I'd like to highlight 3 of them, which I think are sort of like the most the prominent one, or the important ones. The first one is the literacy, the understanding of how to use technology, and this appear in many studies, and for instance, our survey last year showed that despite that around more than 63% of women actually owns a mobile phone, and 42% actually a smartphone, only less than 10% actually claim that they know how to use it for financial transaction. So that shows actually that many of women do not feel comfortable or do not know how to use a smartphone in this case to do a financial transaction. The second issue is about obviously owning the device. It may be an issue of cost, and also kind of mixed with literacy, the first challenge, but also maybe there are some, social constraint where women are not supposed to have her own mobile phone, or she needs to share it with her husband or with her children in the family. And the third one is something that is beyond the control of the women, which is the quality or the coverage of the ICT infrastructure. We need at least 4G kind of network. A lot of progress has happened over the past 3 years. The president really wants to push the digital financial service, and then the government is trying to make sure that at least 99% of villages in Indonesia actually covered by internet and mobile phone, a good cellular network. But these are the current challenge that we have. So I think this is an issue that is perhaps not new. And even the pandemic actually, as we all know, actually accelerate digital financial services. It's not actually constrain digital financial services. I was reading an article a couple of days ago, and one of the major e-platforms say that one of the 5 store owners on their platform actually a newcomer, meaning those who just starting selling their products on the e-commerce platform since the onset of the pandemic. This is 20%. Another e-commerce say that they've been seeing that an increase of 250%, so 2.5% in terms of the number of people who wants to sell the products. So this is the term that I call it use case. So as long as we can provide a strong use case for women to either make profit or to actually improve the welfare, economic welfare of her family, they will find ways to how to master devices, how to make use smartphone, any type of phones to actually do financial transaction. And this is a challenge for us also at the policy level, how to really deploy a massive and systematic programmatic education, digital literacy program for women, and not to mention, I mentioned about women in the eastern part of Indonesia, women in other islands. So these are very complex situations that we have, but I think we are committed to make it happen. That's all I will take at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Pakari. So yeah, thank you for kind of showing us both the challenges as well as some of the opportunities, especially now that we're in COVID and digital financial services are even more necessary. I mean, we all need to kind of wrap up, and I just wanted to kind of think a little bit about the future. Now we've kind of launched the strategy in June. We are beginning to think about implementation. There is a kind of interministerial kind of network called the JKIP that that kind of oversees the strategy. And but this strategy is, we want it to be kind of much broader. It's a living document, and we want it to inspire other kind of development partners to kind of join forces with the government and us at ADB to kind of, you know, achieve that very ambitious vision. So how do you think that the JKIP and development partners can coordinate it and work well together to achieve that vision?
Thank you, Ibu Keto. That's a great question. I think, as you mentioned, together with the launching of the strategy, Financial Inclusion for Women, we also established a network for financial inclusion for women. So this network is loosely defined, meaning that all stakeholders, be it from government, from private sector, from international development organization, will be welcome to be member of this. And we are lucky to have champion and promoter like Ibu Ernie and her colleagues already member of this network. This network will organize a regular meeting. We already designed our work program for the remaining months of this year and already started discussing our program for next year. And then through this network, we hope we will be able to coordinate all the various programs, not only from Ibu Ernie's ministry, but from other line ministries. As you know, a lot of programs are already ongoing to support women empowerment and women financial inclusion by many ministries, agencies, and also international development agency donors. So we will welcome everyone who participating in this webinar to contact us at the Secretariat, which also serves as the office of this network, JKIP, so that we could, invite them to be a member and attend meeting. Membership is less important for us. It's more like how we all could contribute to this very important journey.
Thank you so much, Pakari. So Ibu Ernie, just a final word from you before we wrap up. So the strategy is not just a document, it is really a living document. You know, there's a action plan with concrete kind of milestones. Could you perhaps share some of the milestones that you're most looking forward to or that you think are going to be the most important? I think you may be on mute.
Okay, I think we already developed a task force, Pak Hari. In the task force, we can routine discuss what the issue, and especially the plan of action. What is, as Keiko mentioned, that what is the main activity that need to be done first, and what interested for us is, for example, we start with definition of the women lead business. This is very important for us because in the meantime, even in the central statistic, they don't have this kind of definition. We have variation of definition. By using one definition, this is helping us to really promote women and identify, and also we can discuss, compare this situation between Indonesia and other countries. And I think this is very important about the definition of women-owned entrepreneur. And also the second, who are very important for us, for our ministry, is about disaggregated data. This is very important. How every line ministries like Ministry of Cooperative, and then Agriculture, Fishery, they have their own disaggregated data. This is very important. And this is also in line with our main strategy, then gender mainstreaming. One prerequisite for gender mainstreaming is segregated data on men and women, and this is very important for us. So, Pak Johari, we want to also discuss how the line ministry has their own system for the produce disaggregated data, men and women in their area. And another is the policy. One of the action in the document is how the line ministry come up with the policy that are not discriminate for women, that are very responsive to the women's need. This is also one of our priority, and also how, yeah, this morning we discussed about the women as a caregiver. This is also one issue that we need to discuss with line ministry about women as a wife, because from the data we know that actually women, even they are stay at home, they can also do some business, and it's very important for their family and also for the women itself. So maybe this is one several action that need to be done in the future. I mean, in one we call it as a long short-term action. Thank you, Keiko.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, thank you to Pakari and Ibu Ernie, and I think Ibu Ernie, thank you for also kind of reminding us of this diversity of women that are captured in the strategy, and also about the JKIP. Basically, this is a network where we can make sure that gender is mainstreamed across ministries and in different kind of in policies. And I think that really is at the heart of the strategy, is to kind of have that special focus on women, and that's why we established that strategy in the first place. This is a living document. This really is going to be really kind of at the heart of, I think, a lot of gender equality, women's empowerment actions in Indonesia. And I, for one, am very much looking forward to supporting the SNKI and the JKIP moving forward, and to hearing from others on how we can strengthen these actions. So I'll close this session because we're slightly over time, but I'd like to thank Ibu Ernie and Pakari for great insights today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Keiko.
Thank you, Keiko. Thank you, Ernie. Thank you, everyone. Selamat siang. Thank you.
Baik, terima kasih Ibu Keiko serta para pembicara untuk sesi dialog tadi. Apabila Bapak, Ibu ingin meninggalkan ruangan Zoom, kami persilahkan. Seperti yang telah disampaikan oleh para pembicara kita pada sesi sebelumnya, implementasi strategi nasional keuangan inklusif berfokus kepada kelompok-kelompok masyarakat yang rentan secara ekonomi, termasuk kaum perempuan. Bank BRI dan sejumlah penyedia jasa keuangan lainnya turut mengimplementasikannya dengan menyalurkan KUR Supermikro. Sebagai informasi, penyerahan KUR Supermikro juga telah diketahui dan didukung oleh Bapak Iskandar Simorangkir selaku Deputi Bidang Koordinasi Ekonomi Makro dan Keuangan Kemenko Perekonomian. Beliau juga menjabat sebagai Ketua Sekretariat Dewan Nasional Keuangan Inklusif. Nah, bagaimana Bank BRI menyalurkan KUR Supermikro pada pelaku usaha perempuan sejauh ini? Mari kita saksikan pada tayangan video berikut.
Halo, nama saya Elvi. Saya pedagang online. Nama online saya Elvi Kinken. Ini saya berjualan online udah sekitar 1,5 tahun ya. Saya jualan online ini hanya di rumah saja karena memang saya udah nggak bekerja di luar karena saya mengurus anak-anak di rumah. Jadi saya bisa berjualan di rumah sambil mengurus anak di rumah. Jualan saya ini produknya dia macam-macam sih, ada pakaian wanita, memang pakaian untuk khusus wanita. Ya ada dress, ada kemeja gitu. Tapi yang terus ada cardigan, ada outer, jadi macam-macam. Jualannya saya lewat online di Facebook. Biasanya saya live di Facebook. Ya, ini warna hitam. Ya, size-nya ini 30, size 30 ya Kak. Size 30, kalau mau ini fix. Kalau di online malah lebih banyak ya karena memang yang beli orang dari mana aja, karena memang saya live-nya di grup khusus online, jual beli online kayak gitu. Kalau ke teman-teman kan hanya itu saja, jadi nggak ada perkembangannya gitu. Saya sebelumnya belum pernah pinjam, maksudnya ke bank-bank gitu. Saya pinjam di SMERU ini, prosesnya cepat banget dan saya langsung buat modal, tambah modal usaha saya. Saya mengajukan pinjaman BRI di unit Duren 3 dan itu prosesnya cepat banget dan cuman hanya 2 hari saya langsung cair. Saya mengajukan pinjaman SMERU ini karena memang untuk tambahan modal saya jualan gitu, karena memang tadinya penjualan saya cuman hanya sedikit begini, jadi belum ada stok banyak, makanya saya mengajukan pinjaman di SMERU ini. Dan ini cepat banget dan saya bisa langsung ada stok barang. Dengan jualan online saya bisa ada customer dari NTT, dari Surabaya, pokoknya dari Jawa Tengah, Jawa Timur itu udah semuanya udah pernah ada. Sumatera, Medan, Papua itu udah pernah. Jadinya customer saya udah ke seluruh Indonesia. Harapan saya dengan pinjaman di SMERU ini supaya bisa lebih berkembang lagi usahanya, jadi saya bisa buka toko buka toko sendiri gitu.
Fungsi kredit KUR adalah juga untuk melakukan pemberdayaan UMKM perempuan. Nah, kepada Ibu Elvi kami percayakan, amanahkan kredit sebesar 5 juta untuk mengembangkan usaha beliau. Semoga bisa lebih berkembang lagi usahanya, Bu.
Amin. Terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih kepada Bank BRI. Semoga semakin banyak pelaku usaha perempuan yang bertahan bahkan meningkatkan performa usaha mereka selama dan pasca pandemi COVID-19. Agenda berikutnya adalah panel diskusi tentang Making Finance Work for Women in Indonesia. Sesi ini akan membahas inklusi keuangan untuk perempuan dari berbagai aspek, termasuk tentang bagaimana Bank BRI mendukung UMKM di Indonesia, serta fintech membantu pengusaha dan sebagainya. Sesi ini ditujukan tidak hanya untuk mendiskusikan praktik-praktik terbaik, tetapi juga pengalaman Indonesia di inklusi keuangan untuk perempuan. Making Finance for Women in Indonesia terinspirasi dari program-program Women's World Banking. Namun, sebelum dimulai, saya ingin menyampaikan jika sesi ini didukung dengan fitur penerjemah melalui teks yang berada di bawah layar aplikasi Zoom atau YouTube. Baik, kita mulai saja sesi berikutnya yang akan dipandu oleh moderator kita, Ibu Christina Mains, selaku Senior Advisor Market Development Women's World Banking. Sedikit tentang beliau mempunyai latar belakang karir yang kuat sebagai praktisi strategis di lembaga atau perusahaan jasa keuangan di Singapura untuk regional Asia Tenggara. Sedangkan pembicara pada sesi ini adalah Bapak Dhani Wildan selaku Vice President Social Entrepreneurship and Incubation Division Bank BRI, Bapak Edi Danusaputro selaku CEO Mandiri Capital Indonesia, Ibu Windy Natriavi selaku Chief Product Officer dan Co-founder Awan Tunai, Bapak Pavel Finalek, President Commissioner PT Home Credit Indonesia, dan Bapak Elwin Pagabean, Advisory Lead Southeast Asia Women World Banking. Saya undang Ibu Christina untuk memulai sesi berikutnya. Ibu, dipersilakan.
Thank you, Pak Dika, and thank you, Bapak Eudirio, Ibu Keiko, Pak Jahari, and Ibu Ernie. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Pak Dika said, I come from Women's World Banking, which is a US nonprofit that has been around for 40 years, and we work around the world to help women financially become included, whether they're unbanked or underbanked. So, I think in the earlier panel, Ibu Keiko was discussing the Indonesia's Women's Financial Empowerment Strategy. And I want to reiterate how special it is and how unusual it is, because first it's focused on women as a demographic. Secondly, the focus in terms of skills building. And finally, it focuses on how to use digital tools to include women. So as women's financial inclusion cuts across many industries, many ministries, I think we have a wonderful panel here today that represent many of these aims of the Women's Financial Empowerment Strategy for Indonesia. So let me just briefly reintroduce our panel, so I think they're going to track you. To my left, I have Pavel Vinalek. He is the President Commissioner of PT Home Credit Indonesia. Straight in front of me on my screen, I have Eddie Danusuputra. He is CEO of Mandiri Capital in Indonesia. To my right, I have Elwin Panggabean. He is my colleague in Indonesia and heading our advisor there. Below on my left, I have Winty Natriavi. She is co-founder of Awan Tunai. And last but not least, we have Bapak Dani Wildan from BRI. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I think I'm going to kick off. I was thinking that we're all here in Asia and that I should choose the oldest person, but then I thought that might be a little bit awkward. So I'm going to go for the youngest one. Windy, delighted for you to join us today. I also note your Forbes Fortune under 30, so even more impressive. Tell us a bit about Awan Tunai's business model and customer base, and specifically, I'm curious to hear about the profile of women customers that you found and some of the interesting notes about, who are your female customers and are they part of family businesses or are they operating on their own?
Great, very happy to be here. Thank you, Christina, for the very warm intro. Very honored to be speaking on this panel. So Awan Tunai, basically, right, we founded Awan Tunai on the belief that millions of unbanked micro SMEs can actually be bankable. We believe, that they can grow to a stage where they can serve millions of customers. So what we do in Awan Tunai is we strengthen the downstream supply chain. We partner with the wholesalers. We serve this unbanked warung, if we call it, right, in the FMCG. And we equip them with digital systems to basically do inventory ordering, digital payments, and of course, low-cost inventory purchase financing. And traditionally, if we talk about the unbanked population in Indonesia, it has been mostly women, right? And I think in part because women-led micro businesses tend to remain small. That's quite unfortunate. So Awan Tunai here is enabling the low-income access to capital, but not only that, but we believe in making sure that they grow as well. So the financing is actually backed by trade and therefore, providing them the capital to basically grow. We have been honored to assist a lot of the woman-led, so woman-owned, but typically they tend to be more in the smaller size. Right now, what we're serving is more of the mid-sized SMEs, in which even though, few women actually own it, but they have been very strong COOs in their own right. COO, I mean Chief Operating Officer. So I would definitely say it's been an honor to see how women actually have such a strong involvement in the SMEs as well.
Thanks, Wendy. And just wondering, how do you find, is there a gender difference between repayment risk in your business? Are men or women better in terms of repayment?
Right. Well, I mean, no offense to the men out here, but from our experience, at least, there was quite a significant difference of around 15% in repayment rates for the lower segment, in which mostly are dominated by women. So that was interesting for us as well. But right now, I think as you grow bigger, then you have much more male-owned businesses, and yes, the repayment rates for us have been stellar in that sense as well.
Well, congratulations. Well, I'm going to turn then to Pavel. He runs a different kind of, a digital online lending business, a very large business. But I'm sure the very first question that would be interesting to us today is, do you feel the same way? how do repayment risk stack out between men and women, the type of loans that you're giving? Can you give us a bit of flavor about how your customer portfolio works?
Thank you for having me on this conference. First of all, good afternoon, everybody. Actually, I was listening even to the previous speakers, and I have a couple of comments. Home credit is offline to online, so we are not doing only online acquisition, but we are simply present in 20,000 point of sales, which means stores, big shopping malls, but also small moms and pops stores, where you can buy some electronics or furniture or refrigerators and so on, so on. And you can buy them with the credit. So I don't see any constraint in acquisition of the women. And actually you would be very surprised if you are looking at the number of our application and the share between men and women, the difference is not big. And if it goes to the approval, I may confirm actually the behavior which was mentioned to my predecessor. Women are behaving usually better. And it's statistically relevant sample what I'm speaking about. Home Credit has in Indonesia over 7 million customers, active customers at the moment. So very, very relevant statistical sample. The share.
Go ahead.
The share of the women in our portfolio is actually over 45%. So there is no huge difference in the inclusion of the women versus the men. And what's another surprising information is that the women tends to, if they go to borrow money, they tend to go for bigger amount than the men, which very often is connected with their business because majority of them are actually self-employed. So the question here is how we can identify the proper risk and the risk properly price. I think this is the biggest question to simply open the doors to women even more. And this is questions which is always hard to answer because there is the only way how you can do it in the underbanked or unbanked through the data, which you are finding in their mobile phones, which you are finding from the third-party providers like telcos and so on. And of course, it goes against the government policies where they try to protect the personal data and so on. So very, very big question for me for the inclusion is how to properly balance the access to the data for these purposes versus the protection of the personal information. And I think one of the answer is the government should be open to, if they want to empower this, they should be open to help the regulated entities to get simply more data for more precise assessment, because this will enable the inclusion. By the way, first tickets are very small. I'm speaking about the tickets below 150 USD on average. Actually, the first ticket usually is the smartphone, as it was mentioned before. So you are enabling the women to connect with the social media, to start to use the phone as we saw it in the video for online stuff for their small business and so on, so on. So you cannot distinguish very often in these small entrepreneurs when it is personal purpose and when it is business purpose. And it's also very important. So I don't know, I spoke too long, so I will leave another questions, but I will add more numbers in later. I hope they are important here.
Thank you so much, Pavel. I mean, great, interesting points there in terms of both data, getting the balance right between enough data to make a credit risk assessment, but in terms of privacy and does the woman know what data is being released? But you have to get the credit risk right. And then, as you said, also it's very important to start women on the path of borrowing and to help them, introduce them to formal financial products. So really appreciate your help on that. Turning to a totally different end of the spectrum, Bapak Dani, as Indonesians, representing Indonesia's largest microfinance bank and the oldest microfinance bank, curious about your scale. I mean, Pavel mentioned that they have 7 million customers in Indonesia. Curious how that balances up today with the micro loan portfolio of BRI. So if you could give us, describe your customer base and your microfinance business. And also, I was on your website the other day and I was noticing you have so many programs to help sole entrepreneurs or micro entrepreneurs. I wonder if you could give us an indication of some of the special programs you have that help women micro entrepreneurs grow their business and develop their financial resilience.
Okay, thank you, Christina, and good afternoon, everybody. I would like to present in bahasa if you don't mind.
Please go ahead.
Okay, baik Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, sebagai institusi keuangan yang berpengalaman lebih dari 100 tahun dan memang kami fokus pada keuangan mikro dan kecil atau SMEs. Kami didukung oleh outlet yang begitu banyak tersebar, lebih dari 9.000 conventional branches yang melayani SMEs di seluruh Indonesia. Kemudian kami juga punya 225.000 lebih electronic channel yang bisa membantu SMEs dalam melakukan transaksi dan lain-lain. Bahkan kami memiliki teras BRI kapal, yaitu kantor yang ada di atas kapal yang bisa menjangkau SMEs atau nasabah kami di kepulauan-kepulauan yang terpencil. Itu bukti bahwa kami sangat fokus dalam melayani SME di seluruh Indonesia. Kemudian berdasarkan portfolio kami memang portfolio di sektor small, medium, micro, small, medium itu sangat dominan ya. Dan tiap tahun tumbuh terus bisnis kita setiap tahun memiliki pertumbuhan dan kami yakin ke depan kita akan punya potensial juga pertumbuhan karena memang financial inclusion sebetulnya belum mencapai tingkat yang optimum di Indonesia. Jadi kami sangat yakin untuk tahun-tahun ke depan kami masih bisa tumbuh. Walaupun memang kita ketahui bahwa pandemi ini membuat beberapa kelompok usaha menjadi agak melambat. Namun kami yakin suatu saat ini akan berakhir dan akan mempercepat pertumbuhan bisnis dan pertumbuhan ekonomi secara luas. Jadi kembali ke bagaimana BRI membantu businesswoman untuk berkembang. Kami dari sektor mikro, bisnis mikro memiliki berbagai macam produk keuangan yang kami desain untuk lebih simple. Kemudian karena unit kerja kami banyak, kami harapkan lebih dapat diakses lebih banyak orang, more accessible for everybody di mana saja gitu ya. Kemudian dari produknya juga kami buat agar lebih sederhana, lebih simple. Terakhir kami melaunching tadi yang sudah disebut kurs super mikro, luar biasa dukungan pemerintah kepada kami agar bisa lebih banyak melayani nasabah-nasabah yang ada di level mikro bahkan di ultra mikro. Jadi tidak lepas dari dukungan pemerintah. Kemudian untuk meningkatkan financial inclusion, tercatat kami tidak kurang menyalurkan bansos atau social assistance itu kepada lebih dari 7 juta atau kurang lebih 7,4 juta untuk program sembako sendiri, di mana 90% adalah penerimanya adalah perempuan. Jadi kami yakin ini adalah sebuah langkah yang baik sebagai langkah awal dari sebuah proses financial inclusion yang berkelanjutan. Kemudian selama pandemi kami adalah salah satu bank yang melakukan program National Economic Recovery. Jadi BRI bersama bank-bank lain adalah salah satu bank yang melakukan program kerja itu, di mana kami melakukan restrukturisasi kredit kepada nasabah-nasabah kami, termasuk nasabah-nasabah perempuan. Kemudian kami juga memberikan subsidi bunga kepada pengusaha-pengusaha di sektor SMI. Kemudian ada penjaminan kredit. Kami juga menyalurkan bantuan produktif untuk usaha mikro atau dikenal dengan BPUM, Banpres untuk usaha mikro. Itu beberapa yang kami lakukan bersama pemerintah untuk melakukan recovery ekonomi. Nah, di luar itu, kami selama pandemi itu juga melakukan beberapa kegiatan pemberdayaan SMI, termasuk untuk pengusaha perempuan, termasuk di dalamnya adalah kegiatan training yang dilakukan di rumah BUMN atau House of State-Owned Enterprise, di mana di tempat-tempat itu kami memberikan berbagai macam pelatihan, kemudian pemberdayaan termasuk bagaimana membuat packaging yang lebih baik, bagaimana memperluas pemasaran termasuk pemasaran online, kemudian banyak hal yang kita lakukan termasuk misalnya mengundang businesswoman untuk memberikan motivasi, memberikan tips kepada sesama pengusaha wanita lainnya bagaimana bertahan dalam masa pandemi ini dan tetap memperoleh bisnis yang baik selama pandemi ini. Mungkin sementara demikian, Chris, yang bisa kami sampaikan dari BRI. Terima kasih.
Thank you so much, Pak Dhani. Very interesting stuff. Clearly, many different types of financial services products designed for, as you said, ultra micro SMEs, a comprehensive range. And of course, most unfortunately, with COVID-19, recovery has been a key component of our year. And so the support that you've given women, both in terms of training to develop their financial skills, empowerment, and also, loan restructurings, all very important for this environment. Pak Dhani, you're beneath me, Pak Eddie, you're beneath me on the screen. I know that you lived in Singapore for 12 years and were, somebody squoze your wrist or arm, shall we say, to get you to come back to Jakarta to set up Mandiri Capital. And so delighted that you've done that. Sorry you're missing us in Singapore. But, tell me about your special mandate. I mean, there are many private equity venture capital firms out in the market, but I'm very curious why Mandiri Capital sits under Bank Mandiri and what your objectives are when you look at making a portfolio investment. And tell us how that promotes financial inclusion for Indonesian women.
Thank you, Chris, for the question. Hello, everybody. As Chris mentioned, I guess before moving back to Indonesia, I was in Singapore in private equity, and I was approached by the Bank Mandiri to become employee number 1 to set up their venture capital subsidiary, and the reason is that Bank Mandiri, like other banks in Indonesia, in the region, or globally, are being disrupted by fintech startups, whether it's on the lending side, on the payment side, you name it. A lot of startups, many startups are disrupting financial services. And the disruptors are not necessarily fintech startups. For example, ride-hailing companies like Grab and Gojek, e-commerce companies, they're all eating into banks and financial services market share. So the reality is that if banks do not join into this ecosystem of startups and disruption, we will continue to be left behind. So we have to collaborate. So it doesn't necessarily have to own, but we have to collaborate with fintech startups. And if possible, we set aside some money and we invest. That's what Bank Mandiri did 5 years ago in setting up Mandiri Capital. So we were given a pool of money, and we use that pool of money to invest in startups. We normally do not take a majority stake, so we don't have to take 51%. Actually, we prefer to take like 10%, 15%. Why? Because we have a significant enough stake to help to be able to liaise with management, but we don't want founders to get too comfortable and lose their entrepreneurial spirit. So the past almost 5 years, we've invested into 14 startups, 14. And some are all fintech, and some are related to this topic, which is financial inclusion, women empowerment, and so forth. And I can name a few names. Amarta, which is a Grameen Bank model of peer-to-peer lending, helping women in the villages. That's group lending. Also, Crowdy, which is focusing on giving loans for farmers and also farming stores. And then, for example, also CoinWorks, which gives loans to SMEs and SMEs in not only traditional SMEs, like in the video that BRI was showed before we started, is online SMEs. I think this is the growth of Indonesia. You see many traditional markets, including malls, are less crowded than before because a lot of the shopping activity and the sales activity has gone online. So we need to be able to tap into that market of online sellers. And a lot of these online sellers are SMEs and also women-driven. So that's we want to reach. So the main goal of Mandiri Capital is to reach these new demographics, these new markets, whether geographic markets or segment market that traditionally Bank Mandiri would not be able to tap into unless we collaborated with fintech startups. As you know, Mandiri is a bit different from BRI. BRI is more of a retail bank. We're much more of a corporate bank. So we need to collaborate with fintech startups.
And so what are you saying, Pak Edi? You have to collaborate. Is it profitable for Mandiri to go out to the villages? I mean, is it just easier for you to invest and have somebody else do it? How would you phrase that exactly?
Yeah, so from that aspect, I think Danny will also agree that it's very expensive to go into the villages, right? To set up one physical branch in terms of capex.
I see him nodding.
It just doesn't make sense. The return on investment to set up one physical branch in the village, I think the payout just doesn't make sense in terms of capex and opex, right? So that's a branch. And then we have ATMs. Also, most ATMs do not generate enough fee-based income to cover the maintenance costs and depreciation of those ATMs, right? Wow. So banks have to be more creative. If we cannot or do not want to set up branches and ATMs, and then how do we reach the villagers or the people working living in rural areas? And as SOEs, BRI and Mandiri, we are tasked with the government by OJK Bank Indonesia to do financial inclusion. Laku Pandai, all these agents, branchless agent banking. These are all government initiatives that we have to support, and we will do so, and we continue to do so. And one of the ways to continue to support these government initiatives and help financial inclusion is not by setting up our own branches and distribution, but we partner with the fintech startups.
Such as Awan Tunai.
such as Awan Tunai, who goes into the warung, such as Amarta, and so forth. Yeah, very good, Joe.
Soon, very soon. Anyway, well, thank you for giving us some insight into your mission and objectives over at Mandiri Capital. It's perfect. And last but not least, my dear colleague Elwin, you know, I'm sure you and we hear this all the time. We don't get this Women's World Banking, are you a bank? Or what's a nonprofit that has a name, banking? So, you know, can you tell us, you know, how does Women's World Banking play a role in general improvement of financial inclusion for women in Indonesia? Elwin, do share with the audience.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, first of all, Chris, what I want to say that through our works, we've seen that by investing in women, it's not only benefit the women, but it also benefits the family, benefits the community, benefits the country. And you've heard from other speakers before that there is a huge opportunity by serving women. So this is like our motivations why Women's World Banking want to invest more building financial inclusions for low-income women. And Women's World Banking touches like different areas, different segments within financial inclusion scope. I think like the Women Financial Inclusion strategy that has been presented by before this session also like cover all the segments that Women's World Banking work on. But I think today I'd like to focus on two main areas that I think relevant with our current situations with this pandemic. To build women's resilience and empowerment besides access to capital that has been discussed by other speakers before. The first that we think very important is about like promoting savings as an acquisitions and activation strategy to provide a full suite package of financial products and services to women. What do we mean about this? I think Pavel before has touched a little bit about like how to have like an appropriate risk assessment, and to do so we need data. And for this unbanked and underbanked segment, it's very difficult to have data. And building like a savings behavior can be like one of the strategy to build like a good portfolio of this segment to get like another products and services from financial institutions to get like the full benefits of financial inclusions. We've seen that only this year, as the pandemic has started around the world, 200 plus countries around the world provide social protection or G2P payments, including Indonesia, serving nearly like 1 billion new beneficiaries. It's a huge number. And many of them distribute the payments through direct cash transfer to an account. It's not like all like through a manual process. And everyone knows that Indonesia has a success story to digitize our G2P payments, to give access to formal financial services to millions of unbanked and underbanked women. Digitizing this G2P payment is not only about giving access, but in the long run, the ultimate goal that we want to see is empowerment, prosperity, security, and resilience that we build like among women. However, through our research in Indonesia, we've seen that we need a ton of work to transform the behavior of these beneficiaries to change from manual to digital transactions. Our study found that so far, through like one of the large G2P program in Indonesia, which is a PKH, is only like 9% of these beneficiaries who has started using their account for other transactions beyond G2P payments, which is like for savings or for money transfer. Meaning that there are many beneficiaries who have not getting the full benefits of having an access to the formal financial services. So we feel that to solve these issues, what we've learned that it's not enough only to understand what your clients need or what are the barriers that prevent them in using their account, but also to design solutions that can trigger like a behavioral change for them to use like their account. And in Women's World Banking, using our women-centric design, we bring like the behavioral science to develop not only an effective solutions, but also commercially viable solutions that can drive like account acquisitions and also engagement that can benefit not only the customers, but also the financial institutions. The second services that I'd like to discuss is about microinsurance. Microinsurance is something not really new, and we are growing in Indonesia, but there are many opportunities that we need to push more like around these services. World Health Organizations estimate that each year more than 100 million people around the world are pushed into extreme poverty simply because they have to pay for their health services. And if you look into men and women, unfortunately, we found that women tend to seek medical care less than men, mostly because of anticipated financial pressures and other social culture factors. So meaning that women are have the worst situation as compared to men in terms of the health risk. Hence, if we are talking about resilience, we need to ensure that women has an access to an affordable microinsurance to protect them from future global shocks like what we have now. With so many Indonesian women running their own business, I think one of the speakers said that most of the women are self-employed. It means that microinsurance can ensure they have the funds they need to face medical emergencies without depleting their savings. And in the context of credit, at some point, Chris, microinsurance is an important tool to protect them to repay their loan if it's needed. So Women's Banking, using our experience in how to serve low-income women market, we develop microinsurance services through which we call caregiver. That has been implemented in different markets around the globe. And one of the success story indicators of this program is because we can design a very simple product, affordable for them, no exclusions, that covers many things, including maternity, and also it's easy and to understand by the customer. So this is an important element how to promote more about microinsurance to build resilience for the women customers.
Thank you, Ellen. And, I think it's so true. I mean, I think to my own mother and we probably think of our own mothers that sort of knew that they weren't feeling well and they just kind of ignored it because they were taking care of you or of their husbands, of their elders in the family. Microinsurance that has no exclusions and it's simple and cheap is very important. And also, what Elwin is saying, he does a lot of work with BNI, with midwives, using different G2P accounts or using women as agents to bring women into financial inclusion. So it's a big task ahead for you and your team. I'm going to just sort of change direction briefly because I see our time is running down for the discussion, but there are a couple of key points that I wanted to touch on, mechanical kind of points. So I'm going to turn and ask Wendy, you've said a bit about how, the capital that you provide for your clients, whether they're merchants or wholesalers. I'm just wondering, do you have a feel for where your merchant customers got funding previously and also your wholesalers? And, do you have any comments on terms of, what the value is of using your firm versus their previous avenues of financing, how that works for them?
Right.
It could be just 2 or 3 thoughts quickly, and unfortunately we're running down to time here. Thanks so much.
Sure, no problem, Christina. So, I think if we take into look at the merchants, right, they get their funding from the wholesalers. And this is exactly why for a lot of our wholesalers, right, they cannot grow beyond what they have currently right now because, even though they get profit, this is actually being given to the merchants. So right now, previously, so a lot of the merchants will get it from the wholesalers. And the wholesalers, where do they get it from, right? Well, it's a little bit of mixture. So I think a lot of family and friends, some what we call loan sharks here in Indonesia, where actually, it is actually family and friends, but obviously, they charge quite high interest rates. There are definitely some banks, right, that provide them, but obviously this potentially only applies to the 1% of the wholesalers that we talk to. So a lot of it is very sporadic, right? And I mean, if I were a bank, would make sense, right? Because, the level of detail that you just get through, and as Eddie and Padani has mentioned, it doesn't make sense, right? So what we have then, kind of actually innovated in Awan Tunai, that's why the recording of the transactions are very, very important for us, because then instead of getting the data from the smartphones, which number one does not really tell us how much of the wholesalers or the merchants actually are able to do in terms of trade. So we actually get the data from the wholesalers themselves. And so right now, Awan Tunai has been really fortunate in that sense that this also is one of the reasons why we've kind of managed to really get adoption quite well in the wholesalers. We right now have around 65 wholesalers and 4,500 merchants. Is because, yes, previously they were taking it from this really random and kind of like expensive sources and unverified, or lending it themselves. And yes, we managed to kind of like tap into that and help them solve a little bit of that problem.
Fabulous. So, 65 wholesalers and 4,500 merchants, getting cheaper, easier to access financing. That's quite a good start, I would say. Pavel, following up on Wendy's comments, the thing I think a lot of people commonly would like to know, why are digital lending rates so high? And, more realistically, in terms of some of the regulatory issues surrounding, payday lending, digital or offline lending that's, for consumer purchases, what is your view in terms of rate caps on digital lenders? And, how does that impact, if at all, financial inclusion of women? Is it good for women? Is it bad? A lot of people look at the headline rates. So can you frame that issue for us? Thanks so much. You're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry. Speaking based on the experience from 3 continents and 10 countries, everywhere discussing actually with the regulators, being everywhere regulated entities, and also very often actually introducing this retail unsecured lending. The home credit at the moment in the Indonesian market share on the unsecured retail loans, they own actually over 50% of the market share. So if we take the data from the OJK, so it's really significant experience, I would say. And the experience here is, yes, if you are looking at the interest rate, it may look high. If you are looking on the overpayment, it's totally different story, because the ticket is small and short, and it has to be small and short because you are introducing the credit to the financially illiterate person. We heard that one of the help could be this, having the saving account and share this information as access to the credit. But today it's not the reality. Actually, the reality, and it will sound as a huge paradox, but the reality is that home credit very often being the first loan to the borrower, to the guy who, or to the lady who wants to borrow the money from the home credit. It's actually introducing the way how to save. The underbanked and unbanked population, through many surveys which we did, they usually know what they want to achieve. They don't know how to do it because they don't have the resilience to behave as those ones who are more educated. So they say we should get better education, we should save for better education, we should get it, and afterwards increase our ability to earn or our ability to sell our products and so on. But when it goes to the execution, they are not resilient. So the first small ticket is actually distinguishing the people and teaching the people how to start to save for the first repayment. And that's why you understand that probably the share of those ones who are not repaying is much higher. When it goes to the bigger tickets, very well selected people with the higher education, which usually banks are targeting. So you need to simply price for it. On the other hand, if you would compare the overpayment of our loan, which is around less than 30%, with the overpayment of the mortgage over 30 years, actually it will be smaller, even though that interest rate on the mortgage looks very nice. So you need to think what's the proper balance to enable the inclusion here. And my point of view or experience is actually much better than the rate cap, is really focus and allow the people be regulated by the regulator, Bank of Indonesia and OJK, and focus if the companies are not mis-selling. And it's much more important. You need to price the risk, but you need to say simply the customer what is the price. You shouldn't hide any fees, any interest rate, any late fees, nothing like this. Everything has to be very simple and very properly communicated. Afterwards, it's decision of the customer to count if it is for him the good value proposition or not. And I really see this as an important thing because I experienced the market myself personally, where the regulators or politicians, it's actually more often politicians than the regulators, imposed the rate cap. And what happened is actually the market share for the regulated entities get smaller, simply shrunk, because they couldn't price the risk properly. But what happened? These people still don't need to, it doesn't mean that they will stop to borrow money. They still need to borrow money to continue their business, small business, and so on. So where they go? They go to the loan sharks. So this gray industry just getting bigger. And I believe this is not in interest of anybody. This is really happening because it's not regulated, it's not controlled. The collection is very, very often not standard and so on. And I believe this is very, very important when you are taking this assessment to think through all these consequences very properly.
Thank you, Pavel. So, I think, as you noted, really important to make sure that people aren't, that lenders, in consumer lending are not mis-selling, that it's simple and clear to read and easy. And it sounds like you're saying, customer beware and customer choice, but knowing that, a first digital loan or a small loan from a shop when you're buying a refrigerator or something is a way of getting used to servicing debt and building a track record. So very, very important stuff.
If I may just one more comment. Sure. What is also important, and I'm sorry, I forgot it, but it's very important. If you are regulated, you are reporting all the information about the debtor to the credit bureau. This is the way how actually you are growing the customer to become bankable. Yes. And that's very critical. While if they will stop the companies like this fintechs regulated, I will be specific because in Indonesia, there are regulated fintechs and there are not regulated fintechs. So if I would speak about the regulated ones and the regulated NBFCs, they all has the access to the credit bureau. They all report the behavior on these small ticket loans, and they are actually building the credit history of the borrower to become a bankable, because as Eddie was saying, simply the cost of the acquisition for the bank is totally different than cost of acquisition for us as a fintechs, who are fully digital, very lean, very focused, very properly trained on what we are doing. We are simply vanilla play, while the bank is having huge variety of the products and so on, and that's why the cost base is totally different. But it's absolutely critical to enable this. If you will not be able to price the risk properly and you will go to the shadow lender, this is immediately lost, because even these non-regulated fintechs are not reporting anywhere. So any learning is simply lost, and you didn't build anything for your overall financial inclusion.
Thank you. And I think that is a valid point. I know it's across Asia, across Southeast Asia. I've known about it for years. It's so important to have a credit bureau that is robust, that everybody has to play fair and put their data into it. At the end of the day, it helps measure risk better and lower pricing. And I think that's what Elwin was also talking about in terms of, you know, when you start a woman to use her GDP account, her PKH account, and she starts saving, you know, even that is starting to build a track record. So it's very important. Turning to the last segment, I quickly wanted to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on some of your businesses. And so turning to Eddie, you and I were discussing the other day how difficult it is to do business socially distanced when you can't travel. How is it impacting some of the startups that you'd like to fund, or you're looking at funding? And if you could sit down with a regulator, what kind of advice, what kind of a conversation would you have with them in order to ameliorate the impact of COVID-19 and our second lockdown in Jakarta?
Okay, thanks, Chris, for the question. And this is the time for me, I guess, to speak on behalf of the startups. Maybe not Awan Tunai, they're properly funded. I think they have a long runway, and home credit also seems like you have a long runway. But the reality is that if you're talking about startups, one of the key metrics of health is runway, which is how long of cash do startups have until they run out of money, right? And a healthy runway would be 18 months. 1 year is still okay. But if you are like 6 months, then that's warning signs, right? So startups are constantly fundraising, and the best time to fundraise is when you don't need the money, right? So that's one of the impact. The real impact of COVID-19, this pandemic, is that it makes it difficult for startups to fundraise, right? Especially those that are post Series B. The ones in Series C, maybe they can rely on local investors, angel investors. But if you are post Series A, Series B, Series C, then it's definitely going to be regional or global investors. And the regional and the global investors, because of this pandemic, they cannot get on a plane and then fly to Jakarta and meet with the management. Zoom meetings can only go so far, right? You actually have to visit the office, you have to touch and feel, you have to visit and have proper due diligence. And that is difficult during this pandemic. So my advice to these startups is that if you still have some runway, stretch it out. So do whatever you need to do to stretch out your runway, that hopefully 1 year becomes 12 months or 13 months or whatever, right? So some of the measures that we've seen are startups, they're reducing employees, or they're temporarily halting salaries, but then in compensation, they will give ESOP, stock ownership program, so that there's retention, that people don't resign. To Chris's point, maybe if I could ask maybe some support from the government for the startups, not necessarily always to the borrowers or to the lenders. These startups, maybe they can have help in terms of also a creative economic style loan or grant that could help with their runway, or some sort of tax holiday and so forth. So the ministries have to be a little bit more creative. I can on a separate occasion, I can have a discussion on this. But yeah, any help for startups would definitely be welcome.
Actually, it's amazing if you was able to do it within 18 months, I have to say, because Home Credit was a startup 7 years ago in Indonesia, and it took us over 3 years to become break even, actually. So it's not small investment in this area because of the data, because you need to learn the losses and so on. And that's why it's so important to price the risk right, and has this ability, and has the data on the customers who has no past credit history, which will help you to substitute the data from the credit bureau.
Yeah. That's so interesting, Pavel. And one thing I should mention to the panel that, Indonesia was not home credit's first market. You had done India, China, Vietnam, the Philippines. So, this comes from a company that's entered markets before. Think about if you haven't even started in other markets before and you can't take that learning with you. So I hear you, Pak Eddie, to the government, be creative, but also to the startups, watch your runway and do whatever you need to do to cut your expenses as you go along. I'd also like to ask, Pak Dhani, from BRE's perspective, I think you've been doing some special programs to support women during COVID-19, and just wondered if you could give us, tell us about the top 1 or 2 programs, the most successful programs you've put on to help women get through COVID-19.
Terima kasih pertanyaannya. Jadi selama masa pandemi kami melakukan beberapa kegiatan itu, banyak hal yang dilakukan adalah bersifat online, mulai dari pemberian pelatihan yang sesuai. Jadi kami mengembangkan aplikasi self-assessment sehingga kami mengetahui persis kira-kira kebutuhan UMKM atau MSME ini apa. Setelah melakukan self-assessment, kemudian kami mengetahui kebutuhannya apa, kami menyediakan pelatihannya yang sesuai. Contoh, ada yang memilih misalnya pelatihan tentang pencatatan keuangan sederhana. Ada juga yang memilih pelatihan tentang kepemimpinan. Ada juga yang memilih pelatihan tentang marketing. Itu salah satu apa yang kami lakukan. Kami lakukan self-assessment, ada kan punya aplikasinya. Kemudian kami memberikan modul-modul pelatihan yang sesuai. Kemudian kami juga melakukan pelatihan-pelatihan melalui tadi rumah BUMN. Kami mengelola 55 rumah BUMN di seluruh Indonesia. Ini bagian dari lebih dari 240 rumah BUMN yang dimiliki oleh seluruh perusahaan BUMN. Jadi dalam rumah BUMN juga banyak pelatihan-pelatihan yang dilakukan. Kemudian kami juga menyasar ekosistem atau komunitas-komunitas yang kami identifikasi ada di sekitar unit kerja kami. Jadi ada komunitas-komunitas bisnis di mana di antaranya adalah komunitas pengusaha perempuan. Itu juga kami datang ke sana, kami lihat asesmen apa kebutuhannya untuk bertahan di masa pandemi ini, termasuk nanti kami mengundang expert ke sana. Mengundang expert, apa yang bisa diberikan oleh expert sesuai kebutuhan komunitas-komunitas ini. Dan tadi kami lupa bahwa dalam hal financial inclusion juga tadi disinggung oleh Pak Edi tentang laku pandai ya. Jadi kami memiliki kurang lebih 460.000 agen bank laku pandai, atau kami sebut mereka briling ya. Ini sangat membantu karena ini bisa menggantikan outlet-outlet kami yang konvensional, kantor-kantor cabang kami konvensional, untuk menjangkau lebih jauh lagi, lebih banyak lagi pengusaha-pengusaha mikro. Karena agen-agen kami ini berada di tengah-tengah pemukiman atau sentra-sentra bisnis, baik itu di kota kedua atau second city, bahkan di tempat-tempat rural. Kami mencatat luar biasa di tempat-tempat tertentu mereka bisa melayani payment, melayani pendaftaran pinjaman, melayani pendaftaran permohonan pembukaan rekening tabungan. Ini juga kami anggap sebagai bagian dari pemberdayaan kepada businesswoman, karena kami mencatat ternyata dari 460.000 sekian itu kurang lebih 46%-nya agen kami itu perempuan. Jadi nanti perempuan bisa melayani perempuan di di lingkungannya, di komunitasnya. Jadi itu beberapa hal yang kami lakukan, termasuk juga kami mengembangkan namanya web pasar. Ini web pasar ini sebetulnya dibandingkan dengan e-commerce yang sudah ada, yang mainstream, itu sangat-sangat sederhana. Jadi memang ini sifatnya lokal, very local. Jadi web pasar ini nanti yang lebih berperan adalah komunitas pasar itu, termasuk pengelola pasar di situ dan pedagang-pedagang yang ada di situ. Pembeli-pembelinya pun lokal di situ, relatif dekat dengan pasar-pasar tadi. Jadi itu juga yang kami catat sebagai kegiatan-kegiatan yang kami lakukan selama masa pandemi, karena kami menyadari pedagang-pedagang pasar yang ada di pasar basah atau disebut wet market itu kesulitan. Pengunjungnya berkurang banyak karena takut ya. Jadi mereka kehilangan omset cukup banyak. Nah, itu atas dasar background tadi kami mengembangkan web pasar ini, sudah kami coba piloting di beberapa kota, sekarang makin banyak yang kami jangkau untuk pedagang pasar ini mau ikut dalam kegiatan web pasar ini. Mungkin demikian, Chris. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Pak Dhani. You know, I can see two sides of the coin here, you know, in terms of very, you know, providing greater access to what used to be bricks and mortar, having to go to the branch, well, now you can go to an agent or Likaja. But also, you know, the very important thing of helping women that were used to having the customers come to them, go online and find a different market, perhaps, either market to your same customers online or going out and broadening your market and entering new territories. Finally, I think we started with Wendy and we're going to end because, you know, I think we've talked a lot about women as micro or ultra micro entrepreneurs today. You're a female entrepreneur, you know, and growing up in Indonesia, I'd like you to talk about if there's one thing that you could tell women or help advise women in terms of what it is to grow a business. Any advice you could give them, or what have you learned from being a founder of a very successful startup that you can pass on to them as advice?
Oh, wow. Thank you, Chris. Very honored. Not yet I will feel successful, but yes, we're making headwinds there. I think the number one thing that I would kind of advise, if I may, right? And I would like to say that actually a lot of women entrepreneurs that I met in the SMEs as well, right? They are definitely the one bringing in the results. Whenever I talk to the owners, they would say, you know, okay, maybe you can go talk to my wife. She knows more about the operations. Or if it's something related to finance, okay, can you double check and confirm with my wife, right? Who's actually running the operations, or my daughter, or what have you. So number one, I would definitely say is that there's definitely a social and cultural norm in Indonesia, right? In which women are traditionally kind of like the bread makers. But what I would like to say is that, you know, we are at the same time bringing in very important results, and just really kind of like be active in your own rescue. So meaning that dare to dream, dare to actually do something different, because in reality, we are already doing, you know, what a lot of our male counterparts are doing. And in fact, there is a kind of like a joke, you know, where you want to basically get results, then you go find a woman. So that was an internal joke that was actually told by my wholesaler, so not me saying that. But yeah, so a lot of women are appreciated by men, right? And I think it really falls down into changing the mindset, but it takes action. And don't wait for confirmation to do something. Don't ask for permission. Maybe that would be my advice.
Excellent. So all you entrepreneurs out there, have conviction and change your mindset and move forward. That's a perfect closing to our general panel. Very quickly, thank you to all the panelists. Very quickly, a couple of questions have come in, and I'd like to try to get in a couple before we go. The first one off the bat is for Pavel. The question is, do you have any tips for other online lenders or lending companies to ensure prudent lending practices for the unbanked and underbanked women who have low literacy? And I think they are saying that some digital lenders are exploitative, or perhaps their collection methods are not up to snuff or are not standard practices globally. What advice would you have to people competing with you in this market?
As I was saying, it's about the number of the data which you are gathering about the customer, and you are trying to verify them through the different sources. So there is, the problem is in this business that there is a lot of fraudsters also, and organized fraudsters. So the data are absolutely critical for verifying the existence of the customer. And you cannot spend so much money, because it's small ticket, short term, to simply go and check the customer at home. What is the practice of the community lending or the banks and so on. So you need to have the access of the data from the different sources and simply verify the same data point that is telling you this is the true customer, and the customer is honest, and the customer is having certain ability to repay. This is absolutely critical. And the second thing is the approach or the collection. I don't see any difference between our collection and the standard banking collection. We are starting with discussing with the customer over the phone, reminding him that he is supposed to pay. When he is 1-2 days past due, we just asking if he didn't forget, and if he got enough savings, or when is his salary, and so on. And this is absolutely critical, because this is what I was saying. You need to be dedicated to actually teach the financial literacy, this basic financial literacy, how to save enough money for each month's repayment. And it starts with this kind of the approach, helping the customer to guide him how to put the money aside, how to plan, explain, follow with him. And this is more the way, like the way pull than to be harsh. Because when you are harsh, the people will start to simply worry, and they will start to be not reasonable. And that's one of the most important learning. So for example, very often we are not having late payment fees. We are just, if the customer cannot pay, we are asking him if he would like to buy the postponement of the payment. It's much more powerful message than the late payment fee. Just one example.
Yeah. Some wonderful tips there, and you know, I guess my initial reaction was I was surprised when you said don't be harsh. You know, having worked for a bank of a large consumer practice, they definitely got harsh pretty quick. So you're saying to look at this customer as being very different and somebody who has to become accustomed to saving to repay. Some great insights there. Elwin, I have a question I think that's right up your alley. I know you very well. One of the questions is about social norms, and the person is saying, as you know, financial literacy for low-income women is very low, and you know, more often than not, they just follow the practices of their parents, and perhaps their parents haven't had these same financial choices. So what do you think is the best strategy to convince them to make their own financial decisions, to do something different, to start their own business and not just follow their peers, their friends, and their parents? And this person said this is particularly a strong risk or behavior in rural areas. So You've done a lot of field work for Women's World Banking and for MicroSave before that. What advice, what insights do you have on that point?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I think, yeah, that's true that undoubtedly that in terms of like financial literacy rate, it's quite low for unbanked and underbanked segment. We found it a lot like on our research, not only the financial literacy rate, but also the literacy rate in general is also quite low. It's quite difficult for them sometimes to understand the message that we share with them. So our view on this, that first we have to be careful when we said that they don't have the capacity or they are illiterate in terms of the financial needs, because at some point, sometimes they do like a financial management on their way, on traditional way. So our advice to financial services, if they want to tap into this segment, first we need to understand about their financial behavior, right? Like using all these manual or informal services, and try to find a way how to transform this to like a more formal ways, because we found that many women like in Indonesia are actually like the finance manager in the household. They are having the the roles to manage like their household financial management. So in that sense, we have to be careful with that. And also, I like to respond a little bit like with what Wendy before said about women entrepreneurs. We found also a lot that when we ask women like, do you want to grow your business bigger than this? And they said that many of them said no, because they are happy with the size that they have currently. But when we look into deeper the reasons of this answer, there are many social norms that push them to answer like that. One is because they feel that become bigger, it means they have like a burden in managing everything, including like taking care of their family. So they wonder, they are worried if they can do that or not. The second, for some people, they also feel insecure if they have like a bigger business than their spouse, because they always feel that the husband or the man is supposed to be like the head of the household who earn more than them. So what I want to say, from the social norms, there are many layers that we need to dig deeper to understand about like either they really like illiterate in terms of financial services, or it's just like a social norms answer that influence like their decisions. So that's how we look about this, Chris. And I think true at some point that they need like a financial capability training, but then at other point we have to be careful also to make like intervention in terms of this.
That is so very interesting, Owen. I know you and our colleague who heads our research efforts, we've been discussing this, that sometimes in COVID-19, perhaps the husband loses his job and the wife's business takes off, and it unsettles the household a bit. And so, you know, we're interested in doing further research on that.
Yeah.
You know, can be very interesting. As you said, they may be perfectly literate. They just know what needs to keep the household calm.
Yes.
I'm going to throw out the question to the panelists. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask a fellow panelist as our last question before we wrap up? Pak Eddie, I think you were interested in terms of BRI and its deposits during COVID-19.
Yeah, no, just two questions actually. One, I think as we know, the general hypothesis previously was that to tackle financial inclusion, it was pushing savings accounts. Now we know that maybe the more practical approach is for financial inclusion is for loan accounts, credit products first, right? So I wanting to get a view from my colleague at BRI, whether that's still the case. Secondly, I'm appreciative of what Women's World Banking is trying to do. It is a very good brand name. So just maybe for Chris, you can share a little bit about what your future plans are in Indonesia.
Absolutely. Pak Dhani, is it true? Do you, you know, how do we drive financial inclusion? Is it savings first or microloans first? Which order is it? Do you know?
Berdasarkan pengalaman kami, sebetulnya yang harus dikembangkan itu adalah tabungan dulu, saving dulu, baru loan. Itu yang membuat bisnis mikro bisa lebih sustain seharusnya. Jadi bukan loan dulu, tapi saving dulu. Sebetulnya itu yang kami lakukan sejak awal. Jadi termasuk sekarang kami juga mengembangkan namanya teman simpedes. Teman simpedes itu sebetulnya konsep dari pengembangan komunitas-komunitas kecil penabung. Dan siapa yang membantu kami di sana adalah agen-agen kami. Jadi ada satu tabungan kecil yang dia memiliki kunci, dan kunci itu dipegang oleh agen-agen kami. Jadi penabung-penabung itu setiap hari menyisihkan uangnya, penghasilan hariannya di sebuah tabungan kecil. Kemudian nanti setelah dirasa cukup, dia akan membawa tabungan itu ke agen kami, dan agen kami yang akan membuka kuncinya, dan kemudian baru dimasukkan ke dalam tabungan, ke rekening bank. Jadi itu yang sedang kami kembangkan, karena kami memang sangat meyakini bahwa financial inclusion itu bukan melulu memang harus berangkat dari pinjaman, tapi seharusnya idealnya adalah tadi merangkul sebanyak-banyaknya orang untuk menabung. Itu adalah step awal untuk memperoleh layanan keuangan yang lain. Demikian Pak Edi, kalau menurut pendapat kami.
Thank you. Well put. Just very briefly, because time is being called, and thank you for the question, Pak Edi. You know, Women's World Banking, we are very busy these days. Our plan is we are literally growing our team in Southeast Asia. Indonesia will be our biggest office and activities. We're doing quite a lot in terms of account activation, whether it's GDP payments or wage digitization. So giving women use cases to sort of get an account activated, move on and graduate, if you will say, from a GDP payment to, you know, having their own business or being financially sustainable. We're doing a lot on the research side, some interesting research in terms of our digital online lenders. Is there a bias towards gender in their lending programs? Is an interesting one that we've been looking at, and some other research topics. Our colleagues on the private equity side also are making investments around the world. Not so much in Indonesia just yet, more looking at India, but we're hoping with a big fork down in Southeast Asia that we're going to lure them to come when the planes start flying again. We also have a network of financial institutions, and we're hoping to grow that. So many things happening. I think Elwin and I and our colleague Angela, who's on the line today, we're very excited about the next year coming, and we're very busy. And so we hope that people will reach out to us if you'd like to partner with us. We do have a lot of international funders, and one of the good things about that is they can help pay for some of the marketing and product development costs if we partner with you. So I, at this point, would like to wrap up. Today's panel has identified there are some really great wins from technology and innovative new financial products, whether it's working capital, whether it's working with core loans. Many different things are happening. I think that all of these things will make an important contribution to women's financial inclusion in Indonesia and improving women's financial resilience. And I hope today's panel has identified some fresh conversations that need to be had amongst regulators, amongst business people, amongst friends and colleagues. So in closing, I'd like to thank our audience for your kind attention. I'd really like to warmly thank my fellow panelists. We've talked a lot these past week or two. I appreciate your time and your contributions and the sharing of the knowledge. And with that, I wish everyone today who's here with us to good health and security and safety in these very difficult and unusual times. Thank you so much for joining us. Selamat.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for being a very good moderator. Thank you, everybody. Enjoyed the panel discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ya, baik. Terima kasih Ibu Chris selaku moderator serta para pembicara pada sesi diskusi kita tadi. Namun mohon tetap berada dan menyalakan atau mengaktifkan kameranya terlebih dahulu karena saya ingin ada sesi foto bersama pada sesi hari ini atau sesi kedua ini. Mohon bantuannya kepada teman-teman panitia untuk membantu aba-aba pengambilan foto bersama ini.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please face your camera and smile brightly. We're going to take the picture now in 3, 2, 1. Okay, once again. 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you so much, everyone.
Terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih. Bapak Ibu, saya ingin sampaikan bahwa sesi tadi merupakan sesi diskusi terakhir pada acara IFIF hari kedua. Bapak Ibu, saya juga ingin menginformasikan kembali bahwa IFIF merupakan acara tahunan Sekretariat Dewan Nasional Keuangan Inklusif yang memfasilitasi pertukaran informasi seputar praktik baik antara anggota Pokja Dewan Nasional Keuangan Inklusif, praktisi, serta pemangku kebijakan dari dalam dan luar Indonesia. Pada tahun 2020, IFIF mengambil tema Transformasi dan Pemulihan Ekonomi Nasional yang telah diselenggarakan dalam 2 hari, tanggal 6 dan juga tanggal 7 Oktober 2020. Bersamaan dengan itu juga, penyelenggaraan IFIF merupakan bagian dari perayaan Bulan Inklusi Keuangan tahun 2020. Pada hari pertama kemarin, kita telah membahas sejumlah strategi untuk mempercepat penyaluran bantuan sosial, program edukasi konsumen dalam rangka perlindungan konsumen layanan keuangan digital, meningkatkan efektivitas program inklusi keuangan dalam pengentasan kemiskinan, dan peningkatan kesejahteraan selama serta pasca pandemi COVID-19 bersama dengan pakar praktisi dari luar dan dalam Indonesia. Sedangkan pada hari kedua, kita telah membahas capaian kebijakan dan program kerja keuangan inklusif untuk segmen perempuan, terutama setelah diluncurkannya Strategi Nasional Keuangan Inklusif Perempuan pada 9 Juni 2020. Tadi kita juga sudah mendapatkan banyak sekali pembelajaran tentang program-program dan juga inisiatif yang dilakukan oleh berbagai sektor, khususnya untuk industri keuangan. Dan kita juga, Bapak Ibu mohon maaf sebelum menutup acara ini, kami ingin mengucapkan juga terima kasih kepada seluruh moderator, pembicara, dan peserta yang telah meluangkan waktunya serta berpartisipasi di hari kedua dan hari pertama penyelenggaraan IFIF tahun 2020. Tidak lupa juga kami haturkan terima kasih kepada seluruh kementerian dan lembaga, khususnya anggota Pokja Dewan Nasional Keuangan Inklusif. Semoga IFIF tahun 2020 dapat mendukung seluruh pemangku kepentingan baik pemerintah dan seluruh elemen kelompok masyarakat dalam implementasi serta mengakselerasi program dan kebijakan terkait strategi nasional keuangan inklusif khususnya selama dan pasca pandemi COVID-19. Bapak Ibu, kami juga ingin mengumumkan bahwa di Abdul Latif Jamil Poverty Action Lab Southeast Asia atau JPALSIA akan mengadakan webinar sebagai wujud inisiatif yang bertujuan untuk berkontribusi dalam menjawab pertanyaan-pertanyaan kebijakan utama terkait bagaimana layanan keuangan digital dan e-commerce dapat lebih dimanfaatkan untuk mendorong inklusi keuangan. Dalam webinar tersebut, JPALSIA akan mendiseminasikan temuan-temuan dari white paper IFII. White paper ini merupakan hasil kajian yang meliputi tinjauan literatur global, analisis data kuantitatif, dan wawancara pemangku kepentingan mulai dari pembuat kebijakan, praktisi, akademisi, serta lembaga swadaya masyarakat. Selain presentasi hasil white paper, acara tersebut juga akan menyelenggarakan diskusi panel antar pembuat kebijakan dan regulator serta grup diskusi pendek terkait isu-isu inklusi keuangan digital. Untuk informasi rinci mengenai pendaftarannya, kunjungi Twitter JPAL-SEA di www.twitter.com/jpal_SEA. Selain itu, kami juga ingin meneruskan undangan dari the SMERU Research Institute kepada Bapak, Ibu, dan rekan-rekan ke forum kajian pembangunan tentang kemiskinan antar generasi dan evaluasi dampak PKH yang diadakan besok pada tanggal 8 Oktober 2020. Kunjungi akun Twitternya di alamat www.twitter.com/SMERU Institute untuk informasi selengkapnya. Akhir kata, sebagai MC, saya pamit undur diri dan sampai jumpa di kesempatan lainnya. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Terima kasih semuanya.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. See you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Take care.